Courtney, do you want front row? I'll move myself. Do you want me to sit front row? You can sit wherever you want.
All right. Well,
You just have to move directly behind the camera.
once Courtney's in the front row, we can start.
I was waiting for it to be something.
Okay, cool. Well, I know there were some folks on our online side of things who wanted to have a chance to purchase the book. So if you're watching, you can make a claim the way we normally do with the live show, right on the stream, and we'll invoice you on PayPal. You can get a signed copy of the book, and I thought it'd be a cool opportunity to chat with you. Get you a smart water. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm distracted.
No, it's okay. There was Zoe actually had a long list of requirements, green room requirements, and so a large smart water.
But can I just
demanded.
Just say I wasn't given the sword I was expecting.
Now that's a Grace problem.
So
we'll fire her later.
Not very, very impressed, guys.
Listen, we'll fire her off camera for legal reasons. But yeah, thanks so much for coming out. I think we've got someone who drove out here 3 hours to meet you, so that was exciting. We'll let him ask a question, maybe. I prepped a few. My starter question was because I know you like Pokemon. So what's your favorite starter Pokemon? Starter question.
So my favorite starter Pokemon, my first Pokemon game was Black and White.
Okay.
So, Snivy was my first ever Pokemon, so I have a real soft spot for Snivy.
That's fair.
But going back and looking at all the previous Pokemon games, it has to be Bulbasaur.
Okay.
Really, because he's kind of frog-like.
Yeah.
And kind of strange looking. So
yeah,
Bulbasaur and Snivy have to be a tie.
I'm sorry, I know I stole probably several audience members' questions.
That was the only question anybody wanted to know.
Already had.
Live stream over. Good job.
But I guess I also wanted to ask. I'm always interested. What were the comics that got you into comics? Because I've read that it was video games that got you into art, maybe. Mm-hmm. But what got you into reading comic books?
So we're right back to Pokemon. Because
I knew it. Yeah, I studied up.
Well, you might as well just do this by yourself.
All right, well, we're joking about this, but
so I was really into Pokemon. I got Pokemon Black when I was 12, and I was obsessed with it. I bought it because of the art on the back of the box. They had drawings of the protagonists.
Yeah,
and so I played through that game, and then I learned that there were comics. And this was my introduction to comics. I knew of comics, but I'd never really bothered. Yeah. And so through my obsession with Pokemon, I started reading Pokemon comics. And I just became obsessed with how you could tell a story so simply with just, drawings on paper and I was just impressed. And from that, I kind of, I discovered this world of manga. I went straight from Pokemon to Death Note.
As one does.
As one does. And I think Death Note was kind of just such a eye-opening experience. I must have been 13, 14 at this time.
That's the perfect age for Death Note.
Right. And I became obsessed. To me, it was this incredibly deep and rich story. I haven't gone back. I'm scared to go back and read it in case it wasn't as good as I remember it being.
Yeah.
But as a teenager, I just thought it was just absolutely just outstanding. And a lot of the art, and I think you can see some of the influence with the art in that book to my current style. But yeah, and then from Death Note, I just kind of this world of manga opened up to me. I didn't really get into Western. I mean, I'm more of a manga reader than Western comic reader. Anyway.
We'll allow it. Yeah.
Sorry, guys.
It's all right. It's all right.
But yeah, that was my introduction to Pokemon through video games.
When you started getting into manga, is that when you started trying to make comics? As a teen, were you kind of making your own little comic books, or did that come later?
So no, that came a lot later actually. I was never very good at art.
Yeah.
I wasn't most artists, they'll be oh yeah, I came out the womb with a pencil.
Yeah.
But I'm kind of the opposite in that every art teacher I ever had was very discouraging.
Yeah.
Just because I was just terrible. I I didn't have any natural ability whatsoever. And it only was, so I used to want to be an author. I've always loved stories. I've always in any form, books. I was a big reader. I love video games. I really got into comics. Any kind of media tell me a story, I was absolutely hooked. But I slowly got into drawing because I would write all these stories. I was a massive daydreamer in class. I would never do any work. I would just be thinking about the space pirates that lived in my head. And eventually it got to the point where it's I wanted to know what they looked like.
Yeah.
And so I basically started learning to draw because I wanted to see what the characters my stories were looking like.
Yeah.
And I kind of slowly got hooked on it, even though I was really bad at it for the longest time. And my art teacher at parents' evening told my parents that I needed to stop drawing these silly cartoons. And
Like, this isn't for her. Like, redirect.
And but yeah, I've forgotten what the question was.
I did too. I think you answered it.
I think that was about it.
Okay. Well, I know you didn't do a ton of you didn't self-publish a ton before Billy.
Mm-hmm.
How did you go about making comics are hard. I mean, I don't make them, but I assume that it's difficult. How did you go about tackling like a 160 something page graphic novel on your first go? Like, how did you study? Did you read like Understanding Comics by Scott McCloud and learn how to, or did you just go for it?
I just went for it.
Really?
I'm a really stubborn person who hates like learning in a very traditional sense. I was very bad at school. Like any like how-to books, I just can't do any of that. I just have to learn just from making.
Yeah.
And so yeah, with Billy, I was also drawing a book for another publisher at the same time I was drawing Poppy's Inferno. So I was doing 2 books at once for my first project, which was like I was working 14-hour days. It wasn't
underachiever.
It was
really
insane.
Over here. Really,
it was stupid. It was absolutely stupid. But no, I God knows how that book came together as well as it did, because I mean I had a fantastic editor.
Yeah.
My editor Ricky Miller with Avery Hill, he was absolutely fantastic, absolute star.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I just went for it. I don't really have anything smart to say.
I know. That's cool. I mean, I love Avery Hill. How did you go about? I know we've had people who want to make comics. How did you go about finding a publisher for your first book? It's kind of unpublished before this. How did you link
hard. So what happened was, my social media was like slowly growing at this point. I didn't have a crazy amount of followers. It must have been about 5K or so. But it was enough that like, when I was making Billy, I had all these character sketches. I had an idea for the vague idea for a plot, which I put on Twitter, and editors started contacting me about it because like people following me. I think that McKelvey was one of the people that was following me and would tweet my stuff, which I think really helped.
Kieran Gillen calls you the future of comics. So how does that feel?
It's ridiculous. What does he know, right? But yeah, so a bunch of editors saw it, and I was getting all these messages from these different publishers. But yeah, ultimately, like, I mean, because I was getting really hyped because I was having editors from like everywhere, it felt like, contacting me about it, and I was unpublished. And all these like they would, these editors were kind of talking up, like, oh yeah, we want to greenlight this immediately.
Yeah.
But then obviously it all fell through, as things tend to do, which I should have expected really being published. But Avery Hill, because their whole like MO is bringing up these new undiscovered artists and people who haven't had a chance to really show their stuff yet. And I think I was the one who contacted them because I'm a massive fan of Tilly Walden.
Me too.
And yeah, I saw that Avery Hill followed me on Twitter, so I thought, well, maybe they're interested. And I shot them a message, and Ricky responded.
Was it like sliding into the DMs?
It was, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and it was like, hi, I have not met your submission guidelines at all. Publish me.
And they're like, you know what?
They're like,
rubber stamp. That's awesome. I guess, okay, so then pandemic happens, life happens.
Yes.
It's Lonely at the Center of the Earth happens. I guess my question, my personal question. I'm not a personal person.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not like Cher. So now that book is as big as it is, do you have any regrets? Like, did you want to go back and be like, damn, I didn't think more than like a couple thousand people were going to read this page?
Well, that was because I expected this book to go so quietly.
Really?
Because I was like, nobody's going to read this. Like, this is, I always find it funny when people in reviews say, like, this book was super self-indulgent. It's like, yeah, I didn't know I was going to publish this.
It was for me.
It was sort of like, it was therapy for myself. And I only took it to Image because a bunch of people were asking if I was going to publish it. So I posted some pages online just because I was proud of them. I thought they were just cool, like how I was using the comic page. And just people kind of like really hooked onto it. And but I don't regret anything in that book.
Yeah.
I think I'm a very open person. I think there was times where I thought, people would ask me, oh, are you worried about people reading this and getting a review or whatever? But I was just honest on those pages, and if people don't like the person in the book, they won't like me, and I'm cool with that, like,
and screw off.
Yeah, right.
One of our staff members, I asked if they had any questions to people who couldn't make it. I guess you kind of answered it, but then at no point in this did you ever want to like create a character to tell this story, or was it always going to be like straight autobiographical? Or did you ever think about maybe I can use someone that's not me to like make it, a little bit more fictional, so have someone to hide behind a little bit?
Well, I think people liked it because it was so personal. I think if it wasn't, I don't think it would have done as well as it did. I think it was like people liked that I was just putting myself out there in just such an exposing, vulnerable way, and it was just like, it was me. I think without that, I wouldn't have been able to do the meta stuff, because like a lot of the book I think relies on being so meta, and the book that it's a book. And I wouldn't have been able to do that if it was a character. I think often I put myself into like the Billy book that I did. I mean, I put a lot of myself into that character, a lot of my struggles at the time when I was at uni and not sure where I was going in my life. I was having problems with my eyesight. I'd done that already. But this book, it definitely felt more of like, it was slightly like performance art, I think, in a way. And so it needed that like realism for it to work. Yeah.
So then you did, well, at the same time, I mean, we see you working on it in the book. You're working on Rain. How is that different? I'm always interested in like collaboration, and this was an adaptation. So like, how much were you able to put of yourself in that? Like, did you have to say on character design or any of the world building? Because you're drawing it, it's somebody else's story, but I mean, it becomes partially your story once you're drawing it, right? So
this is something I find difficult. And I don't think I'm a great collaborator, because I'm kind of a control freak with stuff, and it's less, I like working by myself because I like to have like full creative freedom. But with Rain, I mean, it was pretty fantastic. There were very few times where they said, oh, Zoe, what we want it this very particular way. Like the character designs were all mine. I mean, there was descriptions of the characters in the book, but it was kind of like free game. But yeah, I mean, I think I struggled with because when somebody else is writing the story, I don't have an emotional tie to it necessarily. So I have to kind of make up my own ways to be emotionally invested, because I think to really connect with an art piece, and as an artist, I need to be emotionally connected to a piece of work. So that I definitely struggle with a little bit. But like, I mean, it was great collaboration because I had that freedom, and I think everybody on the creative team trusted me to do what I want, and that's, for a collaboration to work, I think that's what's needed. Is everybody needs to trust each other, right?
Okay. We were getting into some questions. I guess my kind of final one, I know it's not super announced. I know you're working on maybe some licensed stuff. How is that different? Or is it similar to working with Rain when you're working on characters that aren't yours? How is that? Maybe you have more creative freedom because maybe you're being able to tell the story more, but they're still not characters you created.
So it can be difficult. One of the projects I'm working on that I'm writing and drawing, luckily the scope of the franchise is so bizarre and like weird anyway that I've kind of, the guy who owns it was just basically just have at it, do what you want.
So like you fit right in. Weird, all right.
Yeah, exactly. So that feels pretty good, and also I've been able to add a lot more characters to the universe. So it's been good. And it's kind of a year zero thing, so it's like before any of the rest of the series happens. So I kind of there's a lot of freedom there. The other one is it's for a video game franchise. It's a comic tie-in for a video game that I'm a massive fan of. But that one's been more difficult because they have like new games that they have like more games down the pipeline, so I have to match what they're doing. I had to write the plot outline 3 different times because the two of the plot outlines I gave were like, oh, we want to do this in the next game, or this is already being used in various things, but everything is so like under wraps. It's like I as a creator don't know stuff. So it's fun. It's a new type of challenge, and I enjoy the universes I'm working with, so it's great. But it does definitely come with its limitations. Yeah, for sure.
Well, we're getting some questions in here, but I want to offer them up to the room first. If anyone has any questions that we haven't already covered. Anyone want to be brave?
Well, that's great, guys.
Yeah? All right, done. Get out of here. Back to the UK. In the back.
Good night, Pun Pun. And Chainsaw Man. They're the only things. I don't care about anything else.
Oh, okay. He's rolling over in his grave. Anyone else? All right. He drove further than you, Dan. I'm just kidding. All right.
Most of your published works are traditional illustrations with a distinct style. But in It's Lonely,
you exhibit a mastery of mixed media and multiple styles throughout the story. Now that you've been nominated for Eisners for basically everything you've done over the past year, will you continue to explore more experimental narrative structures, or do you want to focus on a single style?
So I think everything I do, I want to be really experimental from now on. I think It's Lonely just like opened up so many. I think It's Lonely was like, when I was making it, I wasn't really thinking what people are going to think of this. And I know to some people it was definitely too weird and out there. But I think a lot of people connected, like were intrigued by like, oh, you can do this with a comic. And so I think going forward, I would love to keep experimenting with structure, and because I mean, I don't think I'll make anything like It's Lonely again. I don't think anything is going to be that, it's not, because I want to just go back to fiction, just telling fictional stories and go into maybe a bit more fun action stuff, but still maintaining the kind of, the mixed media stuff of It's Lonely for sure.
I also just want to say it was funny to see that in one of the pages you have the same ramen brand that I'm a huge fan of.
It is the best. It is the best ramen brand.
Yeah.
Danny, did you have one?
Yeah, I don't really know how to word it, I guess. But so with It's Lonely at the Center of the Earth, how like out there and personal how did you move that one? Wanted to be supportive, like, oh, I'm gonna read your book, like, oh, please don't. Or if they did, how did they feel?
So my family were really mortified when it got announced. I didn't really talk to them. I mean, I told them I was going to do it. I told them that they were going to be a part of it, because I asked everybody who was in the book. I had asked outright, do you mind if I write about this? And everybody was very cool with it. Yeah, my family were very like, oh, you sure? Like, people are going to think certain things or any of that kind of stuff. And like when the book was coming, like when it got announced and they saw kind of the media attention it was getting, they were definitely very nervous about it. But ultimately, I think they've come to realize that it's been a good thing, and they've seen the responses to it, and they've seen kind of the help that it's given people, and they've come around to it. But definitely, like, telling my family about it was we had a little rough patch for sure.
Was anybody ever like, why'd you make me a pigeon? Like something like that.
I think everybody was fairly. I mean, a lot of the people that were in it, I asked what animal they wanted to be. Like my best friend Izzy, she asked to be a blue tit because she has a blue hair and she's a bit of a tit, so that worked. I don't think anybody was. I think my friend Jeff was a little upset that I made him an otter, because he thought he was a weasel, but I told him it was actually an otter, and he seemed to kind of, his rage subsided a little bit. But I think he was. He was upset that he thought he was a weasel.
You can't claim what animal you are, especially if you're a guy getting called an otter. That must be what you are.
Yeah, right.
We have someone here who's asking, we kind of talked about it a little bit earlier, but your influences before your first published work, was it mostly just the manga that we were kind of talking about earlier, or any other artistic influences? It doesn't have to be comic book at all.
So yeah, it was mostly like a lot of the manga I was reading, but also like video games were my first love.
Yeah.
And I was really obsessed with like the Borderlands series. I love Borderlands, and I remember being introduced to that game when I was about 12 and like thinking just like, this is so cool. Yeah. Just like the characters, I was like, the humor in that game, I don't think is very well as I have aged, but when I was 12, I was like, this is so cool. So I think Borderlands was one of my biggest inspirations growing up.
Okay.
I'm not sure. I think also just like things around me. Like I've always been inspired by like the people around me. Yeah, things that I've kind of inspired by characters. But yeah, art-wise, yeah, mostly like video game stuff, I think.
Cool. Michael Perlman is showing off a little bit, saying he's got a lot of your original art at home, including the whole Jessica Jones story. I know, right? Gotta rib you, Michael. He says he hears you're doing more superhero books. Can you tell us a little bit about this? I think we kind of talked around it by talking about like maybe licensed characters, but
yeah, I don't think I can. I think I'll get in trouble. But I'm doing some pretty exciting superhero stuff actually. That I think I could probably say this. The reason I took it was because when they contacted me, when said big publisher contacted me, and they kind of said that this way of writing was something that they were intrigued about going into, and so it kind of was like, oh, because I think I'm hesitant to work with Marvel DC because I'm about like lack of freedom and stuff. Yeah. But the contact I've had so far about this project has just been very like, oh, it seems like they're trying to edge in a new direction a little bit. And so That's all I think I can really say without being in trouble.
Do you know, like, just for people watching, like, you know, when it might get announced? Is it like
Next,
8 months?
it will be next year.
Okay.
In mid next year, I think.
Okay. And Michael, maybe this is why, but why go with the big two when you've done so well with your indie books?
So it's I just want to like test it out. I think like with the project I'm doing, it's a small project. It's like gonna be it's a mini series, so it's not gonna like use up a crazy amount of time, and it's something that I was intrigued. The email that he sent me, I found intriguing enough to be like, ooh, this could be something interesting. Yeah, it's like superhero stuff is not something that I've done much of before. But like I'm gonna say no for a challenge, especially if I could bring my own stuff into it. I'm writing and drawing it. That's freedom for me.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm intrigued. If it, maybe it'll be great, maybe it won't. I mean, I'm always going to go back to doing my own stuff after this. So yeah.
And then we have a middle school art teacher who just wanted to chime in, and that she's apologizing on behalf of all art teachers out there. And she says, or they say, as I told my students during the pandemic, I'm glad you keep creating. So,
thank you very much.
So some apologies for your
well-needed apologies.
Art, yes, from the art teacher community. We have an olive branch. And then we have another follow-up from Michael. He wants to know if you're going to be at San Diego because you've got all these 5 Eisner nominations. Have you been before? And if not, or if so, are you looking forward to it?
I'm going this year. Yeah, it was a very last minute thing. After the Eisners got announced, I thought, well, I'm gonna have to. This isn't gonna happen again. Like I'm gonna have to do it. I've got a table as well, so I'll be there with my stuff, with my books and my original art and that. And I'm very excited. I'm also anticipating I will get massively overwhelmed. But it will be an experience.
I've been scared, like, of going. I've only gone like pre-pandemic, and just like trying to get across the hall. It's just like it's like you're swimming in a school of people, of fish,
Imagine, like always behind a table at Conso feels so much safer. Before I started tabling, I found like cons so overwhelming, but now I table, I can be there for hours and usually be fine now. Like the past few cons I've done, I'm getting into it.
Okay, all right. So
Bring on
Michael,
San Diego.
he's gonna be there. He's gonna buy all your original art. Save
I'm
some for the rest of us, Michael. This poor guy. He's like, I'm watching your show. Cool.
If I get invited,
Okay, all right.
Get an invite, I'll be there.
Do you have any other questions in the room?
It's lonely because it is so personal and it is heavy. Like,
I am surprised, but also not. I think to start with, I think the pandemic opened up a lot of conversation about mental health and things, and so I think after all that went down, I wasn't so surprised. I mean, it saddens me in a way, but it also makes me feel more like I don't know how to word it. It makes me feel like my work is worthwhile. I guess
Meaningful.
Meaningful. Yeah, and that I can connect with people, and that also like I'm not alone in that. And I think it's nice to see that reading the book, they don't feel alone, and I now don't feel alone knowing that people reading it feel that way, or even though it's kind of like I'm happy you're miserable. Like yeah.
We got another question here asking what does a comic creating session look like for you? What's your process?
Gosh, I mean it's so wildly different. It seems like creating something from start to what is it, like a session?
I feel like a session. I feel like it means like a day, like at the studio.
Well, yeah. So I try and get up early and do the kind of 9 to 5 style thing because I think that yeah, because when I first started getting into comics, when I was doing Billy and I was doing the Poppy book at the same time, 14-hour days for like 3 months, that was ridiculous, and I never want to get into that space again.
Yeah.
But life always happens. I'm always like traveling for cons and stuff, so I feel like I'm always like just doing these I won't have any work done for a few days, and then I'll have to just cram for days. So it's never the healthy balance I want it to be.
Yeah.
Will I get there one day? Hopefully. But yeah, like it just is madly different day to day. There's no kind of real rhyme or reason to it.
Do you listen to? I'm always curious. Do you have like a playlist? Do you like make does music factor in at all? Like,
It's
what you're
so
listening to?
sometimes I like to listen to music that feels like the work that I'm doing.
Yeah.
But a lot of what I'm doing now is like very dark and disturbed. So I end up just listening to like the Stardew Valley soundtrack to like counteract it. I also like listening to like really stupid podcasts where people just talk about nothing, just because it's like background noise.
Yeah.
It kind of keeps me mildly entertained, but in a way that's because I used to like to watch movies while I was working, but then I'll just get distracted. So I need something that's like boring enough that it's not gonna take me away from my work, but also entertaining enough that it keeps me awake. So it's a difficult balance. Like that's the hardest part.
Tricky,
actually.
yeah. Now someone's asking that they know you prefer drawing what you write. That the Jessica Jones story was written by the amazing colorist Jordy Blair. What was it like working with you? And Michael is saying that he has no issue that I've been making fun of him for his questions. He did comment that. So
What a
thank
good
you,
sport.
Michael. But yeah, what was it like working with Jordy Blair?
Great. I mean, the thing I found with working with writers is I tend to not be talking to the writers. I tend to talk to the editor. Like the editor brings me the script, and then everything back and forth between me and the editor.
Okay.
So it's like when I work with writers, it tends to feel like I don't really know them. Like I'll get to know the editor, and I'll be dealing with them more than the writer themselves, which I mean, it's worked this far.
Sure.
But yeah, I'm afraid I don't really.
We don't know Jordy.
I don't know.
Jordy, if you're at San Diego,
Bye.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for tuning in. If anyone else out here has any more questions, Nicole's got another one. I'll invite you somewhere else. Sorry.
So you said if you video games completely.
So I am obsessed with The Binding of Isaac. I don't know if you're familiar with that game. It's an indie game that kind of blew up, and it's about this little boy called Isaac who kills demons and stuff with his tears. He just cries all the time, and it's like very like dark humor and very like the guy who made it. Like I'm obsessed with like he makes stuff that's like very personal, so very like ridiculous and abstract. And it's just about like him with his kind of growing up in a very like strict Catholic household, how that affected his art, like an artist and stuff. But it's all just very like silly and ridiculous. Anyway, Binding of Isaac.
I'm like
Best
flashing
game
back
ever.
to like freshman year of college when we were playing Binding of Isaac.
Dude, I'm obsessed. I have like 3,000 hours on that game.
Jesus.
Like I have a problem.
a lot of tears shed. All right. Anyone else? Otherwise, thank you so much for coming out, tuning in, coming for the signing. Thank you so much, Zoe.
Thank you
It's an absolute pleasure. Thank you.